All right, so the guns of my first night vision class. So we're going to start with my backup gun first, which I ended up not using because I brought quality guns. So, you know, that's cool. But it's still a great setup, so I want to go over my thinking behind the gun, the setup, and I actually have changed some things on this since then, even though I didn't use it like officially during the class. So this is a Modern Material 14.5 with a pin and welded Huxworks flash hider, and then I've got the 5.56K can on here. This is one of their legacy cans, so it actually still says OSS on it, but you know, Huxworks now. The gun itself is a completely stock Modern Material Ace. I've been running modern guns forever and I love them. They're great. This is as much stuff as on here. It's still really lightweight. It's extremely accurate. It's running a ballistic advantage barrel. They make great stuff. It's a mid-length gas system, and it's soft, it's accurate, and it runs all the time. So a big fan of that. When I took it to the class, I actually had a Cloud defensive light on it. Now, I'm a big fan of Cloud. They're probably my favorite lights out there in general. However, some of the problems that I ran into with power authority and switchology, if you will, in the class made me change some things. So let's go over that. So right now you can see I've got an old Surefire M600. I have an Overbore Systems. This is the swivel. That's what it is. And so basically it allows you to manipulate the light around so you can move it tight into a laser aiming device or get it closer to the rail or all that kind of stuff. It's a great little product. And so I've got a swivel on here now, and then what I'm running, and you can't see it because it's under the goon tape, but this is a Unitactical Axon. And the reason I put the Axon on here is that when I had the OGL on this gun, so the reason I don't have an OGL right now is because it was a prototype and we had to send it back for further testing and evaluation. So when we get the production models in, it'll go back on here. And the reason I moved to the Axon versus having the dedicated Cloud switches and then the mod button for the OGL itself was that honestly, it's just a lot to manipulate. Now, I can do it. You know, it's just maintaining a presence of mind. It is a training issue, but it's also forcing you to have more steps in order to activate white light, or if you have an IR and a white light head, if you want to activate that flood, if you have your, you know, it's faster than dialing to a laser flood. If you have, maybe you just have your IR laser on, you have your infrared head on, and I need to put some flood downrange in infrared spectrum. So I'm going up front to my weapon button, I'm going back to my laser. It's just more to do. So the Axon sort of solves that, right? So this is the non-programmable Axon, so it's just straightforward. So I've got a laser button, I've got a light button. I don't have an IR head on this. I am planning on putting one of those on here. And then, like I said, when we get the production OGLs in, then it's going to sit right here. And I'll just plug my little crane lead in there, and I'll be all good to go. And that'll be a great setup. Down here, I've got the old Unitactical grip. I really like these, and I actually put another one on my other rifle, which I'll talk about in a minute. I like vertical grips versus hand stops more because of the comfort of running and moving around with the weapon, right? Now, a hand stop works great for shooting. They're fine, but most of what you do with a gun is actually not shooting it, right? When you work with a rifle, you carry it, you move it around stuff, you move it around your body, you're climbing over things, you're jumping over ditches, you're doing all the other stuff that you have to do in the line of your work, right? You're not just shooting your gun. So I like the vertical grips because it's just a much more natural wrist angle and hand angle to sort of just hold on to and manipulate your gun with and all that kind of stuff. So I'm a big fan of those. As you guys can see here, I am running goon tape. I actually have old Magpul M-Lock heat shields under the goon tape, and I have a different heat shield in the other gun I'll talk about. But the reason I'm running the goon tape is a couple of reasons. One, it's really great for cable management, right? So I can just put my cables down wherever, really, kind of like get them neat, and then just tape them down, and they never go anywhere. And that's super nice. And they're not a snag hazard. You're not going to break them, not going to pull them out, not going to get them cut. You know, moving around some crazy stuff in the middle of the night and not notice. Also, it helps with heat mitigation, and it gives me a little bit more of a tactile surface, and that's great, right? You don't want your hands slipping around, you don't want to get burned if you're shooting a lot of rounds, and it keeps you from having to wear gloves all the time. Now, I know some dudes are going to be like, oh, if I'm in a operational environment. You got to have gloves on all the time. Well, hey man, that's not me, right? Like, yeah, there are times I absolutely am going to wear gloves. I have medical gloves if I'm going to be around blood and body fluids. I have gloves if I'm going to be like touching gross people or touching gross stuff or working with chemicals and all that. Like, sure, of course, right? But you lose sensation and the ability to do, manipulate fine items, that fine motor skill. You lose a lot of that dexterity with gloves. It just is what it is. That's why back in the day in the Marine Corps, a lot of our guys cut the tips off the fingers of the gloves. Of course, then it got cold and people got frostbite, but Marines aren't known for being smart. Don't judge us. But the point is that if I don't have to wear gloves, honestly, I'm not going to. I have them on me. I have redundant pairs. But yeah, so I like a little bit of heat shielding because if I do have to, burn it down, I'm not going to get super uncomfortable on my weapon. All right, moving back. So I've got a conditioned gray sling keeper here. So that's just a super simple little Velcro and elastic strap, so I can basically really quickly S-fold my sling like this here and put it under the Velcro and lock it down. And now my sling's all nice and tight to the gun. And if I want to use it, then I just pull the Velcro out and there you go, right? And if you're in a hurry, you're not going to worry about this little thing flopping around. But if you got a second, you can tuck it in and make it all nice and neat. Moving back to the optics package, we have an EXPS 3-1 up here on a Unity mount. And so the Unity fast mounts are fantastic. They're sort of the new industry standard for risers. It gives you that nice height when you're running night vision, especially if you're shooting passively. Getting that optic up a little bit higher is really useful. And if you want to learn more about that, we have a whole video on risers specifically, but the EXPS 3-1 is sort of our flagship holographic weapon sight. It's absolutely fantastic. I love it. I actually like it a little bit more than 3-1. I like the 3-0 a little bit more because I'm a big fan of that classic EOTECH reticle. And then on the back here, we've got the G45 magnifier. So the reason I put a 5x magnifier on this versus a 3x is because it is a 14.5, and with 62 or 77 grain, I can reach out pretty far and get pretty good thermal effects. And this gives me great observation capability as well as a little bit more confident shooting at distances. And we've got that on a Unity Tactical flip to center mount. If you're wondering, this is just it's Cordura from Ranger Wraps. So they make a bunch of different Cordura coverings in a ton of different colors and camo patterns and all that for different optics and lights and all kinds of cool stuff. So they sent those over and I just really like them because, why not make your stuff look neat, right? And then moving back, like I said, it's a completely stock gun. So it's got a hyperfire trigger in it, 45-degree safety, mission first tactical stock, and I'm running a conditioned gray sling. So it's pretty, like I said, it's pretty lightweight setup, fairly streamlined for all the capability this gun provides. And so that was my backup gun. But let's talk about the gun I actually used. Okay, and the gun I actually used in the class, this is another modern material. This is a 10.5, so it is an SBR. And I really like this gun. I really like this so very, very much. So this is probably the rifle I shoot the most. And again, we'll just go tip to butt like we did on the last one and talk about some things I've changed since the class and why I did that and how the gun performed in general. So up front, we've got another Huxworks OSS 556K with a flash hider. I don't really ever run brakes on any of my guns. I understand and appreciate the capabilities and performance benefits of a brake. But for me, it's more about that signature reduction. So even if I'm running on suppressed, I'm going to run a flash hider. I do have a cloud light on here. This is actually the 1.0 of their Rain, and it's amazing. It was still, I'm confident to say it was the best light out on the line for sure. There was one other guy running a Rain 2.0, and we were absolutely dominating with the white light throw. There was actually an exercise that I'm not going to get into. It's a really neat part of the course, but having a good white light and learning what white light can and cannot do for you, very, very neat exercise, and this was a huge value add for me in that exercise. So really, really happy with cloud lights. Like I said before, they're probably my favorite lights for handheld and for rifle lights. I am running a mod button under the goon tape, and then I have the cloud pressure switch, and that is on a cloud torrent mount, as to push the light a little bit forward just to reduce some of that shadowing. Shadowing's not a big deal. I know the internet likes to yell about shadowing or whatever. Like, it's not something you're going to notice a lot when you're actually running a gun and doing work with it, but it also is handy not to have more than you need. So I've got that torrent mount on there to push the light a little bit farther forward. I had a hand stop on this. I had a True North hand stop. Like I said before, hand stops are great for shooting, but just for holding a gun for a long time, patrolling with the gun, walking around with it, using it when you roll your gun over for a transition to pin to the sling. A vertical grip is just more useful, and I like it more for me. It's a thing for me. So I put a Unity vertical grip on here. I actually have under the goon tape, which you can kind of see some color right here. I have a burn-proof rail wrap, and that is, again, something you can use for cable management and for as a heat shield. And then I have the goon tape on top of it, and I did that for a couple of reasons. One, it's redundant cable management, and it's actually more cable management, and I did that because of the way the cables run with this Hydra mount, which we'll get to. So that's why I have goon tape all the way back here. Also, like, this gun gets real hot. It's a very thin rail. It's very lightweight, but just the overall length of the gas system, you know, the gas block's right here, and you know, I like to shoot lots. So the guns get hot, and so having redundant systems of heat mitigation for me is just a nice thing. So I have the burn-proof gear rail wrap under this, and then I have all the goon tape on top again for heat shielding, cable management, and just give me a nice little tactile feeling. And you know, it covers up the pick rails. So some of you guys out there who say pick rails uncomfortable on your hands, well, that solves that problem too. I did have just a real sort of, like, it was a homemade 2-point sling on during the class, and it wasn't awesome. So I can do many things. Designing a good sling is not one of them. So I changed out to an Edgar Sherman sling when I got back from the class. I love this sling. It is amazing. Probably one of the nicest slings I've ever used. And so I had to do it, man. Like, transitioning, slinging the gun to the rear, having a sling be able to get the gun tight to you if you're not using it for a long period of time, all that kind of stuff. Like, that other sling was just not doing it for me. So the Edgar Sherman sling is fantastic, and I put that on there. So that's why I changed out the sling. Coming back, I'm sure you guys on the internet will recognize the Hydra mount. So it's from GBRS. I really like this mount. I know a lot of people say it's too tall. A lot of people say it looks like the Starship Enterprise. Sure, fair enough. But as far as functionality goes, I really like this mount. It worked really well. Now, as I mentioned previously, I did have the OGL on here for the class, and we have sent that back because it was a prototype, and they sent it back for evaluation after the class with some of our feedback. It performed fantastic. It absolutely dominated every other laser out there. If there's a laser you can think of, it was represented in the class, and the OGL crushed, absolutely crushed. The diopter adjustment on that flood was next level. But we don't have it on here right now, so that's why that's barren. But like I said before, we do have a mod button. The cabling running back, I use the goon tape to do that cable management, and then just the crane lead comes up here and plugs into the back of the laser. Up top here we have the EXPS 3-1. So that is our single dot. So it's just a single red holographic dot in this optic. And I have mixed feelings on that reticle. Now, the EOTECH itself performed fantastic. There's arguably no better optic for night vision shooting, passive night vision shooting, and that kind of stuff. It's extremely fast. I actually like the height a lot. Like, just getting up there behind the optic, it's super fast. It presents period tubes beautifully. But the lack of the classic EOTECH reticle does not give you all those different holds that you normally have, right? So the single dot, you just don't have all those holds that you have in our other reticle. I would say that single dot some people think it's a little bit faster. I don't know. I didn't experience any appreciable difference in speed. A lot of competition guys really like it. You know, it worked great for me, but it's something I noticed as we started to move very close and then farther back, you know, so we had like the 3-5 yard lines. I didn't have those negative holds to compensate for height over bore that we normally do in our classic reticle, and then back at, you know, 50 and beyond, again, we didn't have those built-in holds in the reticle, and that is more useful for me under night vision because you're not really seeing those. If you miss, you're not seeing that impact, right? You're not seeing it hit the dirt. You're not seeing splash somewhere, and you can't adjust because you're not seeing that on the night vision that you might normally see during the day. And so it's not as big a deal, I think, during the daylight. But when you're shooting under nods, you know, being able to get that feedback or having a lack of feedback, I noticed there was a little bit of a difference there. So. But I really liked it. Overall, moving back, we got a law folder. So, you know, again, I can fold it up, make it a little bit shorter. Magpul CTR stock, and then on the back here we got the GBRS Valkyrie cheek riser. It's called a cheek riser. Look, it's more of a touch point. All right. So if you want consistency and repeatability in your shooting, you need to make sure that your stock placement is consistent every time. This is something that's been true forever. Archers back in the day used to have rings, so that when they pull back, they touch the ring at the same spot on their cheek every time during their draw, right? This is the same thing. Like, can I run this optic at this height without this? Yes. It's not for me to get behind the optic necessarily the same way as far as like my eye level. It's more to make sure that I have the same part of the cheek riser on the same part of my face every single time, and that's going to mean that the stock's in the same position on my body, and it's hitting the same spot right there on my jawline, right on this back little corner. I just touch that every time. So it's a touch point. So that, you know, if people had questions about that, like why are you raising up your optic and then raising up your cheek weld, like it's not really a cheek weld, it's a touch point. Yeah, but that's kind of the thinking and how I'm running and utilizing that Valkyrie cheek riser. So that is the rifle I ran in the class. Performed flawlessly, 0 malfunctions. You know, it's a super accurate gun, and it ran great. I really enjoyed it. Learned a ton. So those are the changes that I made to my gear, the changes I made to my rifles, and the why behind those changes. I will do my very best to link all of these products below. If you've got any questions, comments, put them below. Tell me what you would have run in the class. I'd love to hear if you guys are actually getting out and doing some night vision training. If you got questions about night vision capabilities, all that kind of stuff. I love talking about this stuff. So get down there in their comments and let's have a neat conversation about it. Or, you know, you can just fling insults. That's fine too. It drives engagement for us either way. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Train hard, live free. See you next time.